Welcome back to the Manual Docker and .NET section of the Getting Started with Docker course. In this lesson, we're going to be tackling how to add HTTPS to our Docker images for ASP.NET Core. And it unfortunately isn't as simple as just saying open that port. So let's pull up here. We have PowerShell. I'm actually going to shrink this up a little bit. And I'm going to bring over my Windows Explorer and shrink this down a little bit. Now, before we get started, let's talk through what the problem is. There's a couple of problems here. But the biggest one is one that Visual Studio has started to hide for us on our normal development machines. And that is that when you work with HTTPS, you have to have a certificate. So right now what Visual Studio does is it creates a developer certificate for us and it just registers it and trusts it. So that we can just do development without having to worry about setting up a certificate or talking to a certificate authority. We're just using a local certificate. The problem is in Docker, we're creating a brand new image, which you can think of it as a brand new machine. And we're saying use HTTPS, but we're not putting a certificate on it. That's a problem. That's one problem. The next problem is that because it's a different machine, we have to trust a certificate on that machine, on our machine. That's a little more complicated because now it's two machines that have to understand and know about the same certificate. Called cert-ASP.NET Core, but we also have to give it a password -p. Otherwise, it will reject it because it's not secured to the password. It's not a safe certificate. Now, the password for me, I'm going to give it is ABC123. Notice it, yes, it's on the command line. You can see it. This is not a violation of a security issue, because this is a local certificate just used on our local machine and our local host or our local containers. Now, if you want to get more secure, that's cool. Go ahead and do so. But this was going to work just fine for development purposes. So when I run this, there's already a valid HTTPS certificate on my machine. So it's going to use that certificate and export it to this location, which happens to be right here. So now there's our certificate, and it is encrypted with a private key of ABC123. Okay, so now we've got that part of it done. We've got a certificate. But now we have to give it to our container. Now, for a lot of things, we want to put this right into the Docker file. However, In this case, we're not going to put it in a Docker file. And the reason why is because if we put it in a Docker file, then we're going to be hard coding the way our certificate works in our Docker file. If we ever take that Docker file somewhere else, it no longer works that way. So I don't want to do that, which does mean I'm going to have to make a much larger run statement. So Docker run, we have our -d and our -p. We're going to map our ports over. In fact, we can probably find, there we go. That was what we just did. And let's change this over to be second attempt. I did stop first attempt, by the way. So second attempt, but there's more in here we have to add. So first of all, we need to tell ASP.NET that we have what the redirect port is going to be. Because remember, I turned it off for right now, but by default, it wants to redirect to HTTPS. The problem is that it needs to know what the HTTPS port is. And since we're changing it, we have to tell it. So ASP.NET core underscore, yes, it's case sensitive, HTTPS underscore port. So it's going to create, and well, whoops, I'm going to put a -e in front of it. And yes, I will give you this command written out word for word so that you don't have to remember to type all this in correctly. You can just copy and paste and modify it for your environment. So our HTTPS port is port 8443. So that's step one. We've told it, okay, here's where our HTTPS port is going to be, so when you want to redirect, you redirect to the right location. Next, we have to set up another environmental variable, but this time it's going to be the existing environmental variable we looked at earlier. Oops. Let's shrink this down a little bit so that, there we go. A little more. I keep clicking on the scroll bar itself. Okay, so -e, and this one is going to be the ASP.NET core underscore URLs. Remember before we looked at this and it said that it was just port 80? We want to have more than that. So we're going to put in quotes, HTTPS is going to be on ://+:443. What it's saying is that you're going to have port 443 on the container. You're going to have 443 for HTTPS on any IP address. That's what the plus means. And then also, so semicolon, we're going to say HTTP on port, well, plus first, port 80. And put that in close quotes. But we're not done yet. Now we do -e for another environmental variable. And this one is going to be Kestrel :certificates :default :path. Is that a long variable or what? But this environmental variable needs to be set to our path for where the certificate can be found for SSL. So we're going to find it. Let's just put it in root/.net. Whoops. .net /HTTPS/ and we'll give it the name of our file. So cert-ASP.NET core.pfx. All right. So that's the next environmental variable. And we have yet another one. And this environmental variable is very similar. So Kestrel -E, Kestrel, _ certificates, _ default, _ password. Remember before we set a password up for this certificate? Well, it needs to know what that password is in order to make use of this file. So therefore, we have to give it the password, which is ABC123. Okay, so far so good. We've told it where the certificate is, but yet we haven't actually put it there. How do we do that? Well, we're actually going to map a volume. And we'll say we're going to map the volume of C:/temp/ certs. And we're going to map that over, so colon, oops, we're going to put a slash at the end of that. Now colon, and then map that over to /root/.net/HTTPS. You get all that? That's a lot of commands. Okay? But what we're doing here is stuff that we probably can't put into the Docker file. Because this HTTPS port mapping, well, we map that on the run command. So we can't put that in the Docker file. Saying that the environmental variable is going to be HTTP and HTTPS, well, we can probably put that in the Docker file actually. So let's set that up next. We'll try and put that in the Docker file. Where Kestrel certificate is located, can't put that in the file because that name might change or the path might change. The default password, can't put that in the Docker file because again, that might change. And mapping the volume, we can't map a specific location on our hard drive except in the run command. So there's not a lot of wiggle room here for making this command shorter. Maybe that one command shorter, but that's about it. But with this, let's see if we can run this. At least it created it. So now let's come over here. We have our web app still open. If we hit refresh, it still runs. But now if I do 8443 on HTTPS, it works. We actually have a certificate. It's secure, it's valid, and we can go to the HTTPS site. Now what we can do, let's go back to the 8000, which is the HTTP site. We'll move off here. We're going to go to Docker PS and do a Docker stop on second attempt. All right, we can clear the screen. So now we have no running web application. We can minimize this. We're going to keep that command I just ran, we're going to keep that in the queue so that we can run it again real quick. But first, let's come over here and make a change to startup and uncomment that section again, the use HTTPS redirection. We'll save this and now go back to our file here, our PowerShell here. We can do a docker build -t for web app. I believe we call it web app, right? Let's look real quick. Images. Yep. So docker build -t for web app version 1.0.2. So we've made a change. So now we're going to build a new version. Let's see how fast this goes because there is a change to our source code. Notice how it blazed right through to step 7 out of 13. And that's where it kind of bogged down a little bit because up until then, it used the cache and then this copy line, oh, I'm sorry, line 6 out of 13. So the copy line is no longer using the cache. So up until then, it used the cache and then it slowed down as it did the copy and then the publish and all the rest, which are now new commands. But steps 1 through 5 we didn't have to do over because we've cached those steps, made it a little faster. All right, so now we have the new version. Let's pull up that very long run command, and we need to change this to be version 1.0.2, and we'll call it third attempt. And that should be all we have to do to get this running. And it's already running. So now if we bring this over here, notice I'm on port 8000 of HTTP. If I hit refresh, it's now on HTTPS port 8443 because that redirection's in place and it knows how to redirect. So yes, it's a longer run command. That's pretty significant. However, doing so gives us that ability to do the redirect, to have the HTTPS, and to have that certificate in the right place and that volume mapped. So what conclusions can you draw from this exercise in doing it manually? Well, first of all, doing it manually allows us to tweak that file and better understand what's going on. But also, we get to see just how much we have to do on that Docker run command to get the support we need. What this shows us is all the stuff that Visual Studio is doing behind the scenes to make our lives really easy. When we do just a Docker run from the play button, and it does all this work for us and more, because it also attaches a debugger. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes that Visual Studio does. When we do it ourselves, it does take some work, but this does show us how we can kind of piece these things together in a way that we control instead of it being magic. Now in our next lesson, I want to come back and talk about just a little bit about testing and how to add testing into this build process. Okay, so come on back for that once you've finished practicing this lesson.